Hey guys, who are we missing? The back row girls. I bet we are, yeah. Okay. Oh, they're on dishes? All right. Oh, I get it. I see. I see. So this afternoon we get to go finally to Daniel in the Lion's Den. No, this morning. It's still morning. It's still morning. Right, so finally we get to Daniel's in the Lion's Den. So I wrote down some things that when I started thinking about Daniel in the Lion's Den, I started considering the world we now live in. And I started writing down a few things like we live in a world with rising anxiety and depression. COVID still exists. There's that's true. It's now endemic. Political polarization and violence, inflation, the war in Ukraine, there are unstable fuel prices, school shootings, contested elections, both here and abroad, culture-wide crisis of gender identity and sexuality, conspiracy theories, QAnon, the breakdown of long-lasting and long-standing social norms, January 6th, natural disasters. It's a great time to be a Christian. In fact, it might be the best time to be a Christian because in a world racked with anxiety, it's the Christian who possesses what the world wishes they had. It's the Christian who can be non-anxious and have peace. In the very beginning days of World War II, and I'm kind of a World War II kind of guy because I was chaplain for guys who flew P-51 Mustangs against Germany in World War II while they were still with us. They're all gone now, but there may be one pilot left living on Oahu. But we haven't heard from him for a while. I think he might be in a facility, memory care place kind of deal. But he's an ace, or at least was an ace. But in the very early days of World War II, America wasn't involved or anything, and Germany had swept through and was going to be threatening England and threatening an invasion of England. And the Blitz was what they called what Germany was starting to do, which was to bomb England mercilessly. Cities were being destroyed, and the Germans originally were being strategic. They were just bombing the airfields so that they wanted air superiority so they could invade England. But one night, one of the German bombers got lost in the English clouds and just let loose their bombs, and they fell on London, and that started the whole, kind of total war thing. Before then, it was not total war. You know what total war is? Like anything is a target. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So the British people, government people, they wanted to reassure the populace to stay strong, to maintain their, oh bless you, you need to let those things out. People who swallow their sneezes, I'm afraid their brains are going to go blowing out their ears one of these days just from all the pressure that they get. So they came up with a slogan and a poster that was rarely used in London and other cities in England at that time. But about 20 years ago, somebody found a copy of that poster. In fact, I probably should get to the introduction thing. Found it, and it's this one. Keep calm and carry on. You've probably seen that. It's become famous. Far more famous than it was in World War II. But the idea is don't be anxious. Do what you do and keep calm and keep doing what you do. Carry on. I really think that's the message of this event in Daniel's toward the ending of his life when he encountered the lion's den. So as we get into this, let's pray and we can see what God has in mind for us to show us in the next 45 minutes. Lord, we are grateful for Daniel and the example that he set us. If he's around there somewhere, say hi to him from us, and we look forward to seeing him. And help us understand some of the inside truth of his life and his experience through this chapter in the book that bears his name. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. So, in Daniel chapter 6, we encounter one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. And it really reinforces this keep calm and carry on theme. You'll see it as we go through it. All right, so somebody read the first 5 verses of Daniel chapter 1, or chapter 6. In, not of. First 5 from that table back there. Somebody from that table, first 5 verses of Daniel chapter 6. That's it. That's all you need. So Daniel had learned how to thrive in an enemy nation. And here he is being set up in a new government, new king. Remember, this is the Babylonian system has done away. And Darius, which history has a question about who this guy really was. There are inscriptions in cuneiform tablets and stuff that bear the name of Darius. But there's no real guy named Darius. So it must have been like in a term, like, we would say pastor. Oh, pastor, what do you think about this? Or that kind of thing. Many people believe it was the general that was in charge of the army that took Babylon, that then became in charge of the Babylonian province of the whole Medo-Persian Empire. And that general's name was hard to pronounce. Starts with a U. Ugabaru or something like that. Anyway, was very Shazar kind of name. It was very Persian. And but they think that Darius was more of a ceremonial title that they gave this guy. But he set up a new multi-tiered level of government. 120 guys were in charge of the Babylonian province. Over them were 3 guys. Now these 120, so what is it, 40 each? 30 each, 40 each, reported to one of these 3 guys. One of them was Daniel. And notice they appointed Daniel, not Belteshazzar. He's now purely known by his Hebrew name, which is really kind of cool. So Daniel had learned to be in his culture, but obviously not of it. And so let me get here. He didn't withdraw from Babylonian society and their way of life to keep from being stained by it. And on the contrary, he served that culture and that society from within for over 70 years. And far from using his old elderliness as an excuse to say, you know what, I'm out. He became one of the top 3 guys in the country of a brand new government. His wisdom and expertise was recognized even by the new regime. I once had a mentor who is way older than I am. He probably was as old as I am now. But when I was a young youth pastor, he was my mentor. He was one of 2 senior fellows of the White House at that time. The other one was a guy named Colin Powell. You might recognize that name from some news stories. But he had spent a couple decades in Afghanistan before the Russians invaded, helped as an engineer for that country, and then spreading the word about Jesus as he could. And he was very, very high up in the State Department. So I learned a lot from that elder statesman. And he kept getting daily briefings. He would go to Washington, D.C. occasionally, even though he was 70 years old or more. He may have been 80, I don't know. The guy, he was really wrinkled. I didn't never ask him his age. And I learned one of my this is an aside, my most important lesson I learned from him. I would always show up late to our meetings. I think 5-10 minutes, because I was always in a hurry. I was a youth pastor. I was doing this and doing that, trying to get the last thing done before I had to go. And I would always show up late. We would meet in a restaurant or something like that. And about the fourth or fifth time that happened, he says, "Ken, I noticed you showing up late." And I go, "Yeah, I am. I'm sorry. I'm really busy. There was traffic or, whatever it was." He goes, "You know what you're communicating to me when you show up late every time? That I am late?" "Yeah, no." He goes, "You're telling me that your time is more valuable than my time." Oh man, okay. All right, I learned it. Right to the heart that one went. So maybe you won't have to learn that lesson now that I've told you about it. So anyway, Daniel performed his job so well that he was actually being considered to be advanced as on top of the three guys, second only to Darius. Well, that can cause problems. Integrity plus success often breeds resentment. And so we see that these guys started looking for a way to get rid of him. Integrity plus success equals resentment. Although he had spent his entire adult life in government service, he was not shaped by the values and expectations of the government at that time. Like in many parts of the world right now, corruption and graft were rampant in government circles. It was amazing how you could become a government employee, work your way up, and get really rich. Because you would siphon off money from, we have to create these sewer lines. Well, yeah, if you want the job, you're going to have to give me some little extra, Government officials were really corrupt at that time, but not Daniel. He was so upstanding and had great integrity that he did not even participate in what was expected of a high-ranking government official. And in fact, it would have been really easy for him, I imagine, to think, hey, these guys took me from my home and put me in a foreign place. I'm going to get back a little what they stole from me. That would have been an easy justification for him. But he didn't. He remained steadfast and upright and had incredible integrity. You probably know the kind of scrutiny that politicians in our country go through if they want to run for a high office, or even just a mayor or even a city council person. You get double checked and researched and looked for any skeleton in your closet. These guys were trying to do the same with Daniel, and they could find nothing. No corruption, no even slacking off, no taking days off when he didn't have to. I mean, he was incorruptible in government service. So, integrity and skill might earn you powerful enemies. Once again, we saw it in other stories. Resentment, jealousy, bitterness that Daniel was being promoted and not them continued to dog Daniel throughout his days in his public service. Maybe his example of his integrity was keeping these guys from getting the graft that they thought they deserved, because they couldn't, because his books were clean. He couldn't account for their graft if they took it. So maybe they were frustrated that they couldn't get what they wanted because he stood in the way. So we too, like Daniel, live in a foreign world in a very real way. Are we in our world? Are we, but not of it? That's a good question to keep asking ourselves. Do people get irritated at us for our integrity, or do we just go along with the flow? Do they get irritated at us for doing what's right, even if we could get away with not doing what's right? So then we come up with a clever plot to get rid of Daniel, verses 6 through 9. Somebody from second table over here, read it. Girl, read it. I forget your name. Faith. Yes. Verse 6 through 9.
So these administrators and his satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, and their advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing.
So these guys came up with a clever way to get rid of Daniel so they could get to what they wanted. More power, more money, more prestige, more stuff, more influence. They came by agreement. This is a classic palace intrigue political maneuver. It says that there was collusion. They were all talking among themselves saying, we got to get rid of this Daniel somehow. And so they came by agreement, which means they were colluding and working behind the scenes. It's a timeless tactic of a divisive government of conniving. They lied without hesitation. Notice that they said in verse 8, all the high officials of the kingdoms, the prefects and the satraps and the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance. All of them, except Daniel. He would never have supported that move, and possibly other government officials too. But they lied. They said, all of us, we're in agreement, unanimous. It's our thinking that you should do this, all of us.
They all wanted to get rid of Daniel.
But Daniel was one of them. He was one of those officials. They did not include Daniel. So they lied without hesitation, and they appealed to the king's vanity. Let me see what I wrote on his. He was probably flattered that his whole, governmental department guys thought that, that he was worthy of this kind of attention, would think so highly of him that they would suggest that nobody pray to any god or person other than to him for a period of a month. He was so flattered that he didn't notice the absence of Daniel.
Why only a month?
It was just to.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
why wouldn't the king think why only a month?
Well, it was the purpose is coming up. The proposed law would serve an important purpose, and that is the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar was trying to accomplish with the statue in the plain of Dura, consolidating his government, establishing his dominance. A new sheriff is in town, and this is a good way to establish that everybody agrees, yes, there's a new sheriff in town, and I'm him, all right? So they've tried to, very cleverly, collusion together to say we're all doing it, which was a lie, and that appeals to his vanity, and the law would serve an important purpose to consolidate his rule. And they wanted it to be serious. They put it in writing, not just a decree, which was in writing, but it was actually broadcast by announcers, whatever they called those guys. Heralds. But was that?
Heralds,
yes. but make this a written law with a seal that says it can't be changed. No, it can't be revoked, can't be changed. This is big time serious. We think you're worth it, king, is what they were saying. They wanted it so that it could not be revoked, could not be changed. So the plot thickens. They start spying on Daniel. Daniel walked right into the trap. All right, somebody from the first row over here, read verses 10 through 15. All right.
When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." Then the king,
All right, you can stop there.
okay.
All right, that was through verse 15.
13.
That was 15.
Oh, that's 13.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed."
All right, there we go. So Daniel walked right into the trap, and he knew it was a trap. I'm certain he knew because he was tracking his progress. And he said when the law had been signed, that's when he went back to his room, opened the windows, and prayed as was his custom. Now, there's no biblical injunction up to this. He should pray 3 times facing Jerusalem. It was just his personal habit. It wasn't like the Muslims have a rule that they have to pray 5 times a day facing Mecca, and they have their little rugs that they throw up and they put their foreheads to the ground. He did similar thing, but he did it 3 times a day. And so there's several ways he could have responded. He could have, let me just back up on that one. He could have rushed to the king and said, "Oh, don't sign the rule. Don't sign the law. Don't sign it. I'm not for this thing." He could have done it before it's signed, but he didn't. And he could have afterwards rushed to the king and says, "This is not a fair law. You're going to lose me in the process." He could have gone home in anger and frustration and complained to his friends about it. How unfair this is. Just how dare he? He could have gone home to pray, but kept the windows closed. He could have gone home to pray, but prayed silently while walking around the house. There are a lot of ways he could have gotten around this thing. He knew they were setting a trap, and he walked right into it. He played right into their hands. He continued praying toward Jerusalem, and notice that he was thanking God. And he was asking God for mercy on the part of his nation. If you read chapter 9, you'll see the kinds of prayers that he did. He was thanking God and praying on the behalf of his countrymen at home, in Babylon and at home. He was actually doing what Solomon had declared should be done when Solomon dedicated the temple in 1 Kings. Somebody look up 1 Kings 8. And read verse 46 through 50. 1 Kings 8, 46 through 50. Who's got it? All right, go ahead.
46 to 50?
Yep.
When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to the enemy, who takes them captive to his own land, far away or near. And if they have had a change of heart in the land where they are held captive, and repent and plead with you city you have chosen and the temple I have built for your name. Then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea and uphold their cause. And forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you and cause their conquerors to show them mercy.
So that's what Daniel was doing. What Solomon had said. Daniel was praying for God's mercy. He was pleading for the cause of Israel or Judah. He was confessing the sin of his country. He was thanking God for protecting them to this point and was asking, pleading, can we forgive us and send us back home? That's 1 Kings 8, 46 through 50. It's pretty incredible that Daniel knew the Bible. He knew that scroll so well that he made it a 3 times a day habit to make that kind of prayer. That's pretty impressive in my opinion. Notice he wasn't begging God for deliverance from this trap. He was thanking God. It says Daniel went 3 times, thanked God and prayed for his mercy. He wasn't begging, saying, God, please let this go away. I don't want it. But instead he stayed calm and he carried on. When the document had been signed, he continued his practice of praying to Jerusalem. All right, I've already told you all that. Okay, cool. Now we have the tattletales. The guys who go, hey king, guess what? So somebody read verse 16 through 24 of Daniel 7. 16 through 24. Who's got it first?
All got it.
Okay.
Then the king commanded, how many verses?
16 through 24.
Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fed.
Okay, let's stop there. All right, so the accusers first came to Darius and first confirmed, "Oh, king, wasn't that law you said unchangeable?" Yep, the thing is firm. It stands. Okay, well, in that case, Daniel is praying to somebody other than you. And King realizes that he's been hoodwinked. He's been hornswoggled. Yes.
So I mean, he did like a smart thing in like the way he conquered Babylon.
Yeah.
But is he like a wise guy? Is he stupid?
I think because he was a general, he was like, what you see is what you get. So he trusted these guys. He wasn't familiar with the conniving maneuvering of politicians. He was a general. And so I think he didn't realize what he was doing until after these guys came and accused Daniel, and he went, oh, crummy buttons. They got me.
Wise, but that he was like naive to politics.
He was naive to politics, I think, because he was a general, you know. And I think that Cyrus probably put him in charge because, you know, generally people don't want to mess with a general because he can wreak havoc on you, you know. So, but Darius was caught in a trap of his own doing. He fell to the trick of these guys, and he realized it when these guys came and said, yeah, you're right. It can't be changed, right? Right. Can't be revoked, right? Right. Well, there's this guy, Daniel. Notice they're all calling him Daniel. The name has switched back to his Jewish name, which is, I think, is significant. And the king realizes, oh my goodness, they have me.
How long do you think Daniel was in his position as king before this happened? Because obviously this king has,
I'm guessing this, yeah, I'm guessing this is in the first year of this reign.
seems like he has a pretty strong connection for first year.
Well, yeah, because of his reputation. And I imagine all the other guys had been in high positions as well. And so when the Media Persian guys came in, they kind of reorganized them, but saw, all right, you were really good in Babylon, you're going to be really good for us too, right? Right. Yeah. But that's a good question. And then, so note the anti-Semitism again. There is a guy, one of the exiles from Judah. Why do they have to bring that up? Because they are not Mede-Persian guys. They're now, a conquered nation. Why do they have to bring up the anti-Semitism thing? I do believe that, and we'll see this tomorrow, that spiritual forces are aligned against Israel as God's people. And this is part of the way it shows itself. So even back then, there was anti-Semitism. Their accusation, as before with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, included a lie and a truth. The lie was, he pays no attention to you. The truth was, he's praying to somebody other than you. Why do these guys keep lying and trying to make it worse than what it really is? It was true that he was lying, but it wasn't true that he paid no attention to the king. Then they rubbed it in. They knew that they had Darius over a barrel. They knew they had him right where they wanted him, and they gladly let him waste a day trying to figure a way around this thing. He probably went to the legal experts and the judges and the guys saying, is there any way we can spare Daniel? Is there some sort of loophole in this thing? He spent all day trying to do it, and these guys gleefully let the king just waste his time. Because the law had to be executed, so to speak, at day's end, at sunset. So they rubbed it in, and they then came again by agreement, the conclusion again, and said, and again reiterated that they had Darius right where they wanted him. He was over a barrel, and they had the upper hand. It just doesn't seem wise to me to rub it into a ancient potentate like that. Ooh, isn't that a good word? Just came up with that one. Potentate. All right. So Daniel's arrest, they sent guys and got him. And when the men arrived at his door, that was the first time Daniel knew that the gig was up. His first news that he got that he had been caught, and his praying to God probably meant that he was going to lose his life. He was probably marched some distance away. Oh yeah, this is an important part. He had remained faithful to God, but now it looked like God was not going to spare him. So he was probably marched some distance away to a lion's den. Now, it wasn't a cave or anything like that. It was a building constructed to house lions. And it generally had an opening at the top and a partition wall down the middle, and you could throw some meat on one side, get all the lions in on the one side, lower the door, then you can go down in on a ladder or something and clean it out and come back out and then raise the door up, and the lions can go back and forth kind of deal. They kept lions for sport. They would release the lion and then go hunting the lion. And in fact, the Egyptians developed a dog that would assist them in the lion hunt that we still have the dog today. It's called a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Have you ever heard of those kinds of dogs? They were bred to hunt lions. And so they're fast, they're strong, they're fearless. And so it was a sport for them to hunt the lions. So that's why they kept lions. And, in fact, I think we have a picture. This is from an excavation of Babylon in the 1920s. And this building is called the Lion's Den. And so, and I think you can see that there's a sculpture of a lion up here. This was probably done later in honor of this building that was the Lion's Den. It's obviously in ruins. Were likely stairs to the top that the workers could go and, things like that. There was probably a door on the side that they could remove one lion and take him and go let him hunt and that kind of thing. So it wasn't like a cave that they threw the lions into or anything like that and rolled a stone against the front of the cave. It was constructed for the purpose of keeping lions. So then the sentence was carried out. All right, so, yep. What?
Just say, can I read it?
Oh, yes. All right. Now you got through verse 24.
Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. When he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children, and their wives, and the lions overpowered them, and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den.
Cool. Poetic justice, I think, a little bit. All right, so they carried out the sentence. They took Daniel. The king's words, oh, Daniel, and which were really significant for this guy to say, oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, or no, actually before that, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. For him to say that as Daniel was going up those stairs to the top where he was going to climb down into the lion's den, for him to say that was pretty amazing act of acknowledgement of Daniel's faith. I can imagine the look that was shared between the king and Daniel, where the king was going, man, I didn't want this to happen, wordlessly communicating, I'm sorry. And Daniel just resolutely going up. And then it says that they cast him.
Ancient literature?
What's that?
What does that point mean? Ancient literature from that part of the world allows it?
Allows that, right now it says that they cast him in and the king said, may your God continually serve. That's what the Bible says. But ancient literature, because, and it could have been that Daniel was brought down, and then the king said it, and then everybody went away, and the worker raised the door, and the lions came in, that kind of thing. So it could be any of all those things. But the word cast doesn't necessarily mean thrown. It could mean forced down. There was probably
Because the next one says cast them down before they hit the ground.
yeah, but it could be either or. It could be it's a large a word that has several different connotations to it. I'm imagining an 81-year-old guy who has the favor of the king. He's not going to toss him down into the thing. He's going to let him down by a rope or maybe a ladder or something like that, because they pulled him back up later on. So he didn't, have to climb up. So it could be that they forced him down into the lion's den or put him down in the lion's den, not necessarily tossed him down in the lion's den. Whereas later on, they did toss some people down in there. Right? They then covered the entrance, the hole where they threw the stuff in, and for the lions, covered it with a stone, and then they sealed it with probably a bunch of wax on one surface and a bunch of wax on another surface, like on the stone and then on the roof, and a cord between them. And the king put his signature, his ring impression in it, and so did all those noble guys. Which meant anybody breaks this cord, you're dying too, basically. Don't mess with this rock. And then the door between the rooms was opened, was lifted. The lions came in, and the king spent a sleepless night worried about Daniel. And probably about his own status with those guys who had hoodwinked him, who had so thoroughly worked the system against him. He was probably wondering, all right, what do I do about these guys now? And they're definitely on his bad side. At the break of dawn, the king rushes to the lion's den, terribly afraid. He was worried out of his mind, and in anguish is the word, a translation of the word. He calls out and says, Daniel, you all right? Has God been able to save you? In contrast to the king's anguish, Daniel remained calm and carried on. He says, "O king, live forever." And he uses the official language of the court at that time. And he recognized the voice of his king, and he just responded. And appropriate language, "O king, live forever. God has found me to be innocent," that kind of stuff. And then Daniel described what happened. He didn't say a whole lot. He just said, God sent his angel, shut the mouths of the lions. I'm good. He didn't say what happened all night long. And we don't know a lot. All we know is that God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lion. His angel could have been the angel of Yahweh, like in the fiery furnace thing with the fourth guy walking around inside the fire. Or it could be one of the angels that is designated for protecting people. Have you heard about guardian angels? Well, there's verses in the Bible that reference angels whose job it is to protect faithful people. And you can see some of the references there in Psalm 34 and 91 and Matthew 18 and Hebrews 1:14. This angel was probably visible to Daniel, otherwise he wouldn't have known what was going on. And they may have just sat around all night and talking about heavenly things. What amazing, getting all worked up again, darn it. What an amazing mercy, what an amazing comfort that God gave somebody in that situation. Dang, why did that happen? All right. All right. He shut the mouths, he have not harmed me. He doesn't say much about the whole experience. Daniel then, from within the lion's den, he pled his case. He says, God found me innocent in his eyes, and neither have I done anything wrong against you. I'm an innocent guy. The lions were unable to harm Daniel, and the king was unable to harm Daniel. Daniel was living out the meaning of his name, which is God is my judge. It'll still be there when I go to the next one. All right. Okay. The king responded with joy. And he was like, woohoo, it worked. They brought Daniel up out of that lion's den, and he was found to be totally unharmed. Kind of like his three friends in the fiery furnace. There was, even if they tossed him in there, which would have broken his hip, he was unharmed. So, the aftermath, verse 24 through 27, I'll read those. Come on, open up. Here we go. Then the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. It was a brutal time back then. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth. Remember, there's that phrase again. Peoples, nations, languages. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. How did he find that stuff out from this event? and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So the aftermath, turnabout. The families, those guys and their families lost their lives. It was a brutal time to live. And if you crossed the king like that, you incurred his wrath and his retribution. Darius then issues a decree that nullifies the edict. He issues a decree that says everybody's got to fear and tremble before Daniel's God. This God's a pretty good God. He's huge. He's powerful. He works signs and he works wonders. His dominion will never end. Yeah. And I have to think that he and Daniel had lots of conversations, and Daniel was telling him about what Nebuchadnezzar had learned, what Belshazzar had learned, what he had learned from God himself. And Darius was learning from Daniel, and you could see it in this decree. Now, you have to recognize that even the decrees, nobody can be forced to worship God. Nobody can, but this decree clearly states how impressed and amazed Darius was about the, quote, living God. And once again in this story, God brings the mightiest of rulers down to earth and gives him power of God's greatness, his everlastingness, his dominion in being in charge of everything at all times, in all places.
I don't know if nullified is quite true, right? Because the other one was for 30 days. So
30 days.
30 days.
That's right.
And then he's just making a different decree.
That's right. It didn't nullify it. It made an addendum to it, saying, "Oh, and by the way, everybody honor Daniel's God. You know, nobody disses Daniel's God." Verse 28, the final verse of this chapter. Daniel, it says, this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian, which occurred 2 or 3 years later. So Daniel probably lived to be 85 or older, which is amazing. So he prospered. This last verse reminds us that Daniel spent his entire adult life in exile. He never got to go home. He lived in a metaphorical lion's den, and yet he prospered. He wasn't outmaneuvered by the conniving politicians he was around. And under Cyrus, who took over, once all the battles were done, Cyrus consolidated the entire empire and became king, you know, kind of deal. And under Cyrus, Daniel worked with Cyrus to help craft a decree from Cyrus that allowed the Israelis to return back to Judah. And in fact, not just you can go, but here's a bunch of money and materials and skilled craftsmen and all these guys to go help you rebuild the temple and get things back to, and rebuild your houses. And you're not doing it just walking back and trying to scrabble out something from the harsh environment. There, you're going to have all the help of my kingdom.
Is that Cyrus?
That was Cyrus who did that. And you can see Daniel's influence. That never, ever happened back then. For one thing, kings did not give up free slave labor easily. You remember Pharaoh in Egypt? He had to be basically forced to do it. Cyrus did it willingly and even sent along provisions and skilled labor to help in the process. It was pretty amazing. All right. Oh yeah, here's this one. So under Cyrus, Daniel's prayers began to be answered. His prayers for his country from 1 Kings. All right, so what? We live in exile too. It's a dangerous place that you're walking into. It's not our real home. It probably should never be. However, the world can never harm us beyond what God permits. That's not to say that people have not been martyred for the faith. We know they have. But the world holds no power beyond what God allows. And we can take faith and trust in that. God is our true judge. Not the people we work for, or the companies that we eventually join, or his verdict is the only one about us that counts. Therefore, when we encounter resistance, persecution, misunderstanding, labeling, we can stay calm and we can have peace because we know who's in charge really. We can stay calm and carry on. Boing. All right, that's it. Let's go get some lunch. Hang on.